Welcome back. I hopefully you got to have a conversation there about what those top 5 or 6 principles that you all voted on would mean in practice, and hopefully you got to have a little introduction to each other as well, because I know you're in different rooms this morning. Next, we're going to hear from Doug, who works at Devon Climate Emergency, and he's going to be giving us a quick recap of the issues that we've been hearing about this week. So you've heard a lot of evidence, and on a Sunday morning, it's probably helpful just to have a bit of a refresh of the memory, which Doug's going to just quickly run us through the evidence that we've heard this week. So I will hand over to Doug.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Hi. Let me just check. I can see Dom. Can you see the right screen? Yeah, great. Okay, yeah, good morning, everybody. You recall I met you all yesterday. So I have the job of summarising what you've heard over the past few days. So I've been watching the presentations that you see, and I've been scribbling down little nuggets that I thought it might be useful to recap. So I've just got a few slides to go through. So firstly, just to recap the scale of the retrofitting of buildings problem. So early on in the sessions, you heard just over 40% of greenhouse gas emissions in Devon come from buildings. So that's commercial buildings and dwellings, houses. And 2/3 of those emissions are from the fossil fuel that we use for heating and hot water. And that's principally the main problem. The remaining third is electricity. That's easier to deal with because we're hoping to get more renewable energy to generate that electricity. So whilst it's still currently emitting greenhouse gas emissions, causing climate change, there's a solution for that. The solution to deal with these fossil fuel emissions is generally either electrifying our heating, which will obviously mean we're going to need more renewable energy to power that, or there might be an opportunity for hydrogen as well to be piped to our homes, and we need new boilers to make use of that. In terms of the size of the problem, we've got 540,000 homes in Devon, Plymouth and Torbay, so best part of 500,000 homes. And there are 52,000 commercial premises. There are probably in reality many more than that. They're the ones that have a rateable value. So they're the ones that local authorities collect business rates from. So they're the ones we know about. So that's how big the problem is. Then you've also heard about what it means in practice. So if you remember Dan Lash, who you met on Wednesday evening from the University of Exeter, he mentioned that whilst behaviour change will be important, it's not going to solve the problem by itself. We've got to change the buildings. We've got to make the buildings more energy efficient, and that's by installing insulation and draft stripping. And that can be particularly difficult in older homes where it would need walls would need to be either externally or internally insulated because they don't have a cavity in them. We also heard from Kate Royston that older buildings need to breathe, particularly traditional buildings in Devon, and actually some of the early Victorian terraces as well. A lot of them don't have a damp-proof course, and actually they maintain a healthy internal environment by having continual air changes to keep the air in those houses dry. So if you suddenly sort of tape them all up with draft stripping, you can get damp growing inside those sorts of houses. So good ventilation needs to be planned alongside making homes more energy efficient and airtight. And then of course you've got renewable energy. So alongside making the house more efficient, we then need to get the energy from renewable sources. So that's things like heat pumps, solar panels. And the idea is that you would make the house more energy efficient in the first place, and that means you need less renewable energy to power the building, and that will make it cheaper, but also it means we don't have to manufacture so many solar panels, for example. And you've also heard that the complete retrofit costs about £35,000 per house. Can be considerably more. You also heard a statistic from Dan Lash. He gave a statistic of £10,000 per house. So just to be clear of what Dan was saying there, he was saying that if we'd to retrofit every house at an average of about £35,000, sorry, not every house, if we to retrofit the houses that need retrofitting at an average price of £35,000, if you then divide that by all the houses we've got, because some of the houses won't need much retrofitting. A lot of modern houses, they don't need much retrofitting. They need a little bit, but not as much as a Victorian terrace, for example. And then on average, it works out at £10,000 per house. But you know, Dan did go on to say that those costs are not evenly met, because some houses won't need very much spent, other houses will need a lot spent. So for 2050, we need to be installing 50 heat pumps a day. It's safe to say at the moment, that's going to be single figures at the moment, and spending £250 million each year to get those 500,000 homes upgraded, and that's to achieve net zero by 2050. There are calls, of course, for net zero to be sooner, and if it is sooner, then those numbers need to clearly be bigger. So we've also heard about motivations and challenges. You've heard about lower bills, but just skipping across to the challenges column there, the financial savings, i.e. the lower bill, rarely repays the costs of installing these energy efficiency solutions, certainly not very quickly. So whilst you do get lower bills, it's not necessarily an easy argument to justify the installation of some of these technologies. But of course, we only really think about, we often think of only financial benefit as being the sole benefit, but actually we get more comfort and better health from having warmer homes. An interesting thing to think about actually is that if any of you have installed double glazing in your houses, think about what the motivation was for you to do that, because double glazing does not pay back in its lifetime from the energy savings alone. But you probably were thinking about the security of your home, the comfort of your home, maybe the look of your home, which made you spend the money on the double glazing. And perhaps we need to help people get to that point when thinking about making their homes more comfortable and more healthy, and maybe looking better. Perhaps if you have a house that you might think is particularly unattractive, external wall insulation can be designed to make your house look however you want it to look. So there is a sort of architectural improvement opportunity there as well that perhaps we need to think about as a benefit. So jumping back over to that challenges column, we need new approaches to overcome the fact that the financial savings alone rarely pay for these measures. So you've heard from Ian Hutchcroft early on in the session. I think it was actually in the first block. He would have mentioned the Dutch approach called energy sprong, where the model there is that the company come along and they look at how much you're spending on energy, and they'll take that payment from you as their payment on an annual basis. But in return, they give you a completely refurbished home. But it's very costly. And we're trialling that in Devon at the moment on social housing initially. And then Nicola, yesterday morning, spoke to you about the need for green mortgages. They're coming onto the market now, but they're few and far between. And the idea is there that you get a reduced interest rate on the mortgage if you commit to increasing the efficiency of the home. The other challenge is that measures can be very messy. I think Kate Royston touched on this, the speaker from Tamar Energy Community. Things like internal wall insulation, floor insulation, where you've got to take all your furniture out of the room. In the case of floor insulation, rip the floor up. Wall insulation, you've got to take skirting boards off, radiators off, coving off, all that sort of thing. That's not something to be done or to be considered lightly, is it? So we need to catch people at points when those things can happen with less disruption, perhaps when someone's having a new kitchen or bathroom installed, something like that. That's a good opportunity to do those things. Okay, moving on. In terms of help available, Nicola took us through some of the help that's available for vulnerable people, various grants. A combination of the grants needs to be used often to cover the full price of the measure. The Green Homes Grant is a grant that local authorities have available to spend currently, but again for vulnerable people. And Lendology is an organisation in Devon that can provide low interest loans generally for vulnerable people in Devon as well. But those measures, those finance mechanisms aren't able to provide a whole house retrofit. And we've heard that we need to be retrofitting houses from with a lot of measures. It's no good to just be continuing by occasionally putting in some loft insulation or some double glazing. We need to be getting into those houses and doing everything as quickly as we can. In terms of the able to pay market, so I'm not sure, I can't recall if that phrase has been used before over the weekend. What I mean by able to pay is essentially the people who aren't eligible for the grants that are in the left-hand column on that slide. Mentioned green mortgages already. Clearly you could access a personal loan, but we've also mentioned, haven't we, that the energy savings aren't that great. So if you're intending to just use the energy savings to repay the loan, then that's difficult. Obviously, if you've got an income that you could use to service the loan as well, and you're happy to consider the other benefits that we've just been talking about in terms of comfort and health and maybe the look of your property to justify taking out that loan, then perhaps that's an option. And the Clean Heat Grant is on its way. After Nicola mentioned that to you yesterday, I had a quick look at that. So that's coming along, and it'll be £4,000, up to £4,000 with various caveats attached to it from government for putting renewable heat into your house. That's principally going to be for heat pumps. But remember, you've heard that a heat pump costs £12,000 and the grant might only be up to £4,000. So you've still got significant outlay on that government grant. And then we come on to some of the other case studies you've heard. So Alistair Mumford, the Devon County Council Energy Manager you heard from yesterday, he took us through some things that local authorities can do to demonstrate energy efficiency, and they can do that principally through their own housing stock, because many of the local authorities in Devon have housing stock, council homes. They can take a lead on retrofitting those to demonstrate what whole house retrofit looks like, and indeed the business premises that those authorities operate from. You also heard about how we can encourage locally people to retrofit buildings. Naomi gave you the case study on how they had worked with government to find out from local people in East Devon whether they would like council tax rebates to be used to encourage retrofit. And you heard that if there was a 40% rebate on the cost of measures, that would encourage 50% of the people they spoke to install the measure. So that was a £5,000 package of measures. And people said that with that 40% subsidy, so £2,000 returned to them on their council tax bill, that would encourage them to install that £5,000 package. So that was sort of a discount on council tax. And there was a similar conversation with business rates for commercial premises. And again, it was that 40% discount would encourage about half of the people they spoke to install a package of measures. But similarly, we could also look at how council tax could be banded in the same way that vehicle tax is, whereby houses that have a better energy efficiency could pay less council tax than houses with a higher energy efficiency. So that's something you haven't heard a case study about, but it will be a different way of using council tax to encourage retrofit. Both of those things would require law changes from national government, but national government seemed to be engaged in that conversation because they helped East Devon run that pilot. You heard from Nicola that some local authorities provide building improvement loans at very low interest rates. That doesn't currently happen in Devon. You've heard about buying collectives. We have those running in Devon at the moment for solar power. So we got about 900 people together interested in solar power to go to the installers and say, right, if you give us a quote for 900 installations of solar power, and we got I think it was up to a 30% discount on the market price by doing that. And you heard from Chris yesterday afternoon about the advice, guidance and support that local authorities can put in place through a Devon Energy Efficiency Advice Service. And we're really grateful to you for the feedback you've given on that already. And then finally, the other case study that I presented from Uttlesford District Council in Essex was about requiring people to retrofit their homes. Now, in that example, it was when people had put an extension on their property. And a few of you asked me for some follow-up information, which was how many extensions actually get taken forward in Devon each year. And it's about 0.6% of all the houses in Devon have a retrofit each year. So you're looking at, well, getting on for 200 years if we only relied on extensions to encourage people to retrofit or require people to retrofit. As far as I'm aware, that's the only mechanism we have locally that would require people to retrofit their homes. My last slide is what can national government do? Because remember, we've been talking about what local government can do, but actually there's a lot that national government could do as well, perhaps more substantially. I've just put some examples here. Alistair spoke to you about energy performance certificates and how they could be mandated at a certain standard when you buy or sell a house. They could remove that on retrofit services, reintroduce subsidy for solar panels. That was removed a few years ago, so you have to pay the full price of those. And they could update the building regs to require those efficiency upgrades at the time of a house being extended, for example. Okay, I told Dom I wasn't going to spend 15 minutes, but I think that was 15 minutes on the nose. So there you go, Dom.